I heard my son's voice through the door before I saw anything. It was faint, just my name, Dad, then nothing. The padlock on that storage room door was not there yesterday. I know because I walked past that door twice carrying groceries from my truck. There was no padlock. Now there was one, and my son was on the other side of it in a room with no heat and no light, and the temperature outside was 9 degrees. I ran back to the garage and found the bolt cutters hanging on the wall. 60 seconds later, I had the door open. Carter was on the floor in the far corner, arms pulled into his chest, shaking so hard he could barely hold his head up. His lips had gone gray. He looked up at me, and I could see he was having trouble focusing. I got him inside, got him warm. Took about 20 minutes before he stopped shaking. Then I walked back to the living room where my Aunt Lorraine was sitting by the fire with a book in her lap. I asked her where the key to that padlock was. She looked up and said he needed to learn that staying on the farm meant pulling his weight. She said a little cold never hurt anyone. She actually looked irritated that I was asking. I looked at her for about 3 seconds. Then I said, okay, went to the kitchen and made a phone call. My name is Neil Hartley. I'm 60 years old. I spent 30 years as a structural engineer and safety officer on job sites across New England. I know how to stay calm when something goes wrong. I know how to document what happened before I say a word to anyone. And I know that the most dangerous thing you can do in a bad situation is let the other person know you understand how bad it actually is. Lorraine did not know what I understood yet. I wanted to keep it that way. Let me back up. My father passed in November. He'd been sick for 2 years, so it wasn't a shock, but it still lands on you. He left behind a farmhouse in Vermont that our family had owned since 1962. 40 acres, a barn, a storage room attached to the back of the property, and a pond that froze clean every January. The kind of place that took work to hold onto and looked like nothing to people who never had to work for anything. Lorraine was my father's sister. She moved into the farm after her second divorce about 20 years ago. She managed the property taxes, handled the utilities, kept the pipes from freezing in winter. My father appreciated it. I appreciated it. I was busy with my own life running a small contracting business in Boston, raising Carter after his mother passed 5 years ago. I had no reason to question what Lorraine was doing up there. That was a mistake I won't make again. Carter is 32. He went through a hard divorce 8 months before my father died. His ex-wife, Nadine, filed the papers, kept the apartment, kept most of what they'd built together. Carter needed somewhere quiet to land. Lorraine had offered the farm. At the time, it seemed like the right move. I drove up to Vermont for the funeral in January. Roads were bad, storm system moving in from the northeast. I hadn't been to the farm in close to 2 years. The first night, I noticed things felt off. Lorraine was polite at dinner, the way people are polite when they want you to think everything is fine, but she kept making comments about Carter, about the divorce, about how he had let the family down. Carter sat at that table and didn't say a word back. He just nodded and looked at his plate. I recognized that posture. It's what you do when you've been told enough times that you're a guest somewhere that used to be home. After dinner, Lorraine made a point of telling me that Carter had not been keeping up with his responsibilities around the property. She said it in front of him. She said he spent most of his time feeling sorry for himself instead of doing the work the farm required. She said her brother, my father, would have been disappointed. Carter stood up, said he was tired, and went upstairs. I stayed at the table with Lorraine for another few minutes. I asked how the estate process was going. She said there was nothing I needed to worry about, that she had everything organized, that my father had made his wishes very clear. I told her that was good to hear and went to bed. The next morning, I came downstairs before Lorraine was up. Her laptop was open on the kitchen table, screen still on. I wasn't looking for anything. I was reaching past it to get to the coffee maker, but the email on the screen stopped me. It was addressed to someone named Arthur. The subject line said, "Signature page revised." In the body, Lorraine had written that she had the new version ready, that the handwriting was close enough to pass review, and that once the document was filed, the property transfer would go through before the 90-day contest window closed. She wrote that neither Neil nor the boy were likely to notice in time. I read it twice, then I took out my phone and photographed the screen. I poured my coffee. I sat down at the other end of the table, and I called Clifford Pruitt. Clifford Pruitt and I have been friends for 30 years. We met on a job site in New Hampshire back when I was still doing field work and he was auditing a construction contractor for the IRS. He spent 22 years with the federal government tracking money that people tried to make disappear. He retired 6 years ago and now works as an independent financial consultant out of Providence. He is methodical, quiet, and he does not get rattled. I told him what I had seen on the laptop. I read him the email word for word. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Send me the photo. I'll start pulling public records on the property and the estate filing. Give me 48 hours. I said, "Move as fast as you can. I'm still in the house." He said, "Stay calm and stay there. Don't let her know you saw anything." I said, "Okay," and hung up. I forwarded the photo. Then I finished my coffee and waited for Lorraine to come downstairs. She came down around 8. She made herself tea, asked if I had slept well, and told me the roads might clear by afternoon. She was completely normal. That's the thing about people like Lorraine. They can do what she had done and then stand in a kitchen and ask you about road conditions. I told her I slept fine. I asked if there was anything useful I could do around the property while I was there. She said the barn needed some attention and that Carter knew what had to be done. That afternoon, the storm hit. By 3 o'clock, you couldn't see the tree line from the kitchen window. The wind was pushing hard from the northeast, and the temperature was dropping fast. Carter had gone out to check on something in the barn. I was in the living room going through some of my father's paperwork that Lorraine had stacked in a box by the bookshelf. Around 4, I realized I hadn't heard Carter come back in. I asked Lorraine where he was. She said she had asked him to take inventory in the storage room. She said it in the same tone she used to talk about road conditions, casual, like it was nothing I knew right then. The storage room was a separate structure at the back of the property. No insulation, no heat source. In January, with wind chill pushing below 0, the inside of that room would hit dangerous temperatures within an hour. Carter had been out there for at least 45 minutes. I put on my coat and went out through the back door. The wind hit me immediately. I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. I moved along the fence line toward the back of the property, keeping my head down. When I got to the storage room door, I found the padlock and called Carter's name. His voice came back weak, just my name. Then quiet, I ran back to the garage. The bolt cutters were on the wall where I had seen them the day before. I grabbed them, went back, cut the lock, and opened the door. Carter was on the floor, shivering in a way that told me his body was working hard just to keep his core temperature up. His lips had gone gray. He was conscious but slow. I carry a safety and first aid kit in my truck out of habit from 30 years on job sites. I went and got it. I got him inside, got thermal blankets around him, monitored his temperature for the next 20 minutes. He came back slowly. The color returned. His hands stopped shaking. He looked at me and said, "She locked it from the outside." I said I knew. He said, "I found something yesterday in the office." Papers on her desk. I asked her about them, and she told me I was confused, that I didn't understand how estate documents worked. Then this morning she asked me to go check the storage room inventory, and I didn't think anything of it. I asked him what the papers said. He said there were 2 versions of a will, side by side. One was the original document he had seen before, the one my father had signed years ago. The other had different handwriting on the signature line. He said he noticed because the signature on the second version didn't have the small loop my father always made at the end of his name. Carter had watched his grandfather sign documents his whole life. He knew what it looked like. I told Carter to stay by the fire and rest. I went to the living room. Lorraine was in her chair with the book in her lap, like nothing had happened. I told her Carter had been in there for close to an hour and his temperature had dropped. She said, "He's young, he'll be fine." I said there was a padlock on that door that wasn't there yesterday. She said I put it there. The latch doesn't hold. I've been meaning to fix it. I looked at her for a moment, then I said, "Okay, I think I'm going to head to bed early. Long day." She nodded and went back to her book. I went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, and called Clifford again. I told him about the storage room. I told him what Carter had found. I told him about the 2 versions of the will and the difference in the signature. Clifford was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've already pulled the estate filing records. There's a revised document sitting in the probate queue in Montpelier, submitted 3 weeks ago through a third-party agent. It hasn't been notarized yet. That's the window." I asked him what we needed. He said a probate attorney who can file a formal handwriting examination request before that document moves forward. I have someone in Burlington. His name is Stewart. I'll call him tonight. I said, "Do it." Then I said she locked my son in that room, Clifford. She knew exactly what the temperature was. He didn't say anything for a second. Then he said, "I know, we'll handle it the right way that matters." I said, "Okay." I hung up. I sat in the dark for a while. Then I went back downstairs, made myself a cup of tea, and sat at the kitchen table across from Lorraine's closed laptop and waited for morning. The next morning I came downstairs early and acted like nothing had changed. That is harder than it sounds. When you know what you know and the person who did it is standing 6 feet away making toast, every instinct tells you to say something. But I had spent 30 years on job sites where the wrong move at the wrong moment caused more damage than the original problem. I knew how to wait. Lorraine asked if I wanted eggs. I said yes. We sat at the same kitchen table where her laptop had been the morning before. The laptop was closed now, moved to the side counter. She had coffee. I had coffee. She asked about my drive back to Boston. I told her I was thinking of staying one more day, that there were a few things around the property I wanted to look at before I left. She seemed fine with that. maybe even relieved, like she thought it meant I wasn't suspicious of anything. After breakfast, I went out to the barn where Carter was already up and working. He had color back in his face. He was moving carefully, still a little stiff from the cold, but he was standing and he was focused. I told him to keep doing exactly what he was doing and to stay away from Lorraine as much as possible for the rest of the day. I told him we were leaving tomorrow morning and that by the time we left, everything we needed would be in place. He asked me what I was going to do. I said, I'm going to let her think she's winning. Carter looked at me. He said, she told me last night that the farm was going to be managed properly from now on. She said Dad, meaning your father, had made provisions to make sure the property stayed in the right hands. She said it like she was doing me a favor by telling me. I said, what did you say? He said, I said thank you and went to bed. I told him that was exactly right. I spent the rest of that morning doing what I told Lorraine I would do. I walked the property, checked the barn roof, looked at the fence posts along the east side, noted a few things that needed attention in the spring. I took photos on my phone. If Lorraine was watching from the window, she would have seen a man doing exactly what he said he was doing. Around noon, Clifford called. He had pulled every public financial record connected to the farm going back 14 years. The property had a shared maintenance account that my father had opened in 2009 to cover taxes, utilities, and upkeep costs. Both his name and Lorraine's were on it. My father had contributed to it regularly until his health declined. Lorraine had continued making withdrawals after he stopped contributing. The withdrawals were small, never more than $400 in a single month. Spread out across 14 years, they added up to just over $190,000. Clifford said the amounts were sized specifically to stay under the threshold that would trigger automatic review. He said whoever was making those withdrawals understood exactly how the monitoring systems worked. I said, she spent 22 years married to an accountant. Clifford said, that explains it. He told me Stewart had already filed the formal examination request in Montpelier. A contested estate examination was standard procedure. There was nothing about the request that would signal to Lorraine that anything was wrong. The examiner would compare the signature on the revised will against 12 verified samples from documents my father had signed over the past decade. Stewart had pulled those samples from property records, tax filings, and 2 prior estate documents. I asked how long the examination would take. Clifford said 3 weeks, maybe 4. He said in the meantime the revised document could not be notarized or filed. It was frozen in the queue pending review. I said that was enough. That afternoon, I did one more thing. I asked Lorraine if we could sit down and talk through the estate timeline. I said I wanted to make sure I understood the process, what had already been filed, what was still pending. I kept my voice the same way I had kept it all day, relaxed. A little tired, like a son trying to get his head around paperwork after losing his father. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and told me my father had updated his will 2 months before he died. She said it reflected his final wishes and that the property would be managed going forward in a way that honored what he had built. She said there was nothing I needed to sign. She said it was all taken care of. I asked if Carter and I would receive copies of the updated document. She paused for just a moment. Then she said Stewart, her attorney, handled all of that and that he would be in touch once the filing was complete. I said that sounded fine. I said he must be a good attorney if Dad trusted him with something this important. She said he's handled everything for years. I thanked her, said I was going to pack up and get an early start tomorrow, and went upstairs. I sat on the edge of the bed and recorded a voice memo on my phone. I spoke clearly, gave the date and time, and summarized the conversation we had just had. Lorraine had told me a revised will existed. She had told me her attorney was handling the filing. She had told me neither Carter nor I needed to sign anything or review any documents. That recording, combined with the email photograph from 2 mornings earlier, established that she knew exactly what was in that document and that she was actively directing its filing. I sent both files to Clifford and to Stewart. Then I texted Carter, pack tonight. We leave at 6. He texted back one word, good. I did not sleep much. I lay in the dark in the same room I had slept in as a boy, listening to the wind outside and thought about my father. He trusted Lorraine because she was his sister and because he was sick and tired and needed someone to handle things. He had no reason to believe she would do what she did. I had no reason either until I did. That is the part that stays with you. Carter and I left at 6 the next morning. Lorraine was not up yet. I left a note on the kitchen table that said we had an early drive and that I would be in touch about the estate process. Nothing else. On the highway south, Carter asked me to explain everything from the beginning. I told him about the email on the laptop. I told him about Clifford and what he had found in the financial records. I told him about Stewart and the handwriting examination request already filed in Montpelier. Carter was quiet for a long stretch. Then he said she was going to take everything, the farm, the land, all of it, and she would have done it while we were grieving. I said yes. He said, how long do you think she had been planning it? I said I didn't know for certain, but that the account withdrawals went back 14 years. I said that people who do things like this rarely decide to do them overnight. They start small. They test what they can take without anyone noticing. Then they take more. Carter looked out the window at the tree line going by. After a while, he said, I kept thinking if I worked harder around that place, if I stopped making her uncomfortable, she would eventually treat me like I belonged there. I spent 8 months trying to earn something that was already mine. I did not say anything back right away. He did not need me to explain it to him. He had already figured it out. After another mile, he said, that's done now. I said, yes, it is. The handwriting examination report came back 3 weeks later. The conclusion was clear. The signature on the revised document did not match any of the 12 verified samples. The pen pressure was inconsistent. The letter spacing did not align with my father's established patterns. The examiner noted that the forged signature showed characteristics common to careful copying rather than natural writing. Stewart filed the report with the probate court the same day. The revised will was rejected. The original document, the one my father had actually signed, was reinstated as the controlling instrument. Under the original will, the farm and the remaining estate assets were to be divided equally between Lorraine and me, with a designated portion held in trust for Carter. The account withdrawals that Clifford had documented were referred to the state attorney's office as a separate matter. 2 weeks after that, Lorraine was contacted by investigators. She retained a lawyer immediately. It did not change what the records showed. She was charged with 1 count of document forgery and 1 count of unlawful imprisonment. The farm was frozen as an estate asset pending resolution of the criminal case. Lorraine moved out and went to stay with a friend in Connecticut. I did not feel satisfaction when I heard about the charges. I felt tired, the way you feel after a long job finally wraps up and you realize how much of yourself you put into it. Carter called me when he heard the news. He did not say much. He said, okay. Then after a moment he said, thanks, Dad. That was enough. The estate was released from freeze in May. Carter and I drove back up to Vermont on a Saturday when the weather had finally turned. The snow was gone, the pond had thawed. The tree line along the eastern edge of the property was starting to go green. We walked through the farmhouse together. It was quiet, a little cold still, but the kind of cold that goes away when you open the windows. Carter stood in the kitchen for a long time without saying anything. Then he said, I want to stay. I said, then stay. He said he wanted to put in a vegetable garden on the south side of the barn, same spot where his grandfather used to grow corn. He said he thought he could get the barn roof sorted out before fall if he started soon. He said it like a man making plans, not like a man asking for permission. That afternoon we fished in the pond. We used old rods I found in the garage, the same ones my father had kept there for years. We did not catch anything worth keeping. We did not talk much. The light came across the water the way it does in May in Vermont, low and steady, and it was enough just to be there. On the drive home, I thought about Clifford. He had given 22 years to tracking financial crime for the government and had watched money get moved around in ways that hurt ordinary people who never even knew it was happening. He told me once that the most common victims of estate fraud were people who trusted family members to handle things because they were too busy or too grieved to look closely. He said it happened more than most people would believe. He was right about that. If you are reading this and your family is dealing with an estate, with property, with any kind of financial arrangement managed by a relative you have not looked at closely in years, do not assume it is fine. Get a copy of every document. Know what was filed and when. If something does not look right, find someone who knows how to read financial records and ask them to look. The window to contest a fraudulent filing is shorter than you think, and the people who commit this kind of fraud are counting on you being too distracted to act in time. My father worked his whole life to hold on to that farm. He trusted the wrong person to protect it. That was not his fault, but it nearly cost Carter and me everything he built. 1 phone call changed that. 30 years of knowing the right person and 1 phone call. That is not luck. That is what it means to have people in your corner who you have never given a reason to walk away. Take care of those relationships. They are worth more than any piece of property. The farm is still in the family. Carter is still there. That is how it was supposed to be. That is how it is now.